Hello and welcome to the first international debate held by myPolitics. My name is Łukasz Kaźmierczak and I'm the host of today's discussion. I'm joined by representatives of youth political organizations from across Europe, whom now I would like to introduce. Maria Raczyńska from Law and Justice Youth Forum.
Good evening, hi.
Kuba Bilski from Ostra, Zieleń, Poland.
Greetings, everyone.
Umberto Masi from Lithuanian Liberal Youth.
Good evening, a pleasure to be here.
Foivos Tsiklias from the youth of Syriza from Greece.
Good evening, everybody.
And Marcello Gamberale from Forza, Italia, Giovani. I hope that I pronounce your name well.
Quite well. Good evening, everyone.
Before we start, I would like to say happy birthday to Umberto. Happy birthday to you. Wszystkiego najlepszego.
Happy birthday.
Now I would like to remind the rules of the debate. The debate will consist of 5 sections. During the first 4 sections, I will ask participants the questions which they knew before. In the last section of the debate, the participants will have the opportunity to speak for 2 minutes about something that they want to mention about European stuff. During each section of the debate, participants can express willing to take the floor and respond to somebody has said before. I hope that the rules are clear and we can start. So my first question goes to Marcello, and the question is, what do you think about the current state of the EU? 2 minutes for you.
Okay, yeah. I believe the European Union has evolved quite fast in the past few months. We were coming from a situation in which the Union hasn't had an actual evolution in the past 10 years. We're talking about 10 years where no vision for the future was outlined by the current leadership, because it felt like we were already at the edge of what could be done according to what countries were willing to do. The COVID pandemic has presented us a situation in which we are overly integrated to act on our own, but we're not integrated as much as it's needed to work properly as other parts of the world do. I think that we are in a pivotal moment in which a new vision for Europe should be brought to the floor, and there is already a lot of topics on which we're working on, because further integration is needed on some parts of it. I see on the international level as an example, but also on the healthcare level, we're witnessing how far we are from being efficient together and how important it is to act together on this topic, and possibly on other fields where states feel they're losing their grip towards the Union, but they are more effective than the Union, then probably we must work on reversing some of the overthought bureaucracy that the Union has posed to some countries. So I see an healthy Union, even though some of the performances that we've seen at the Commission level, as an example, were not as effective as they could be.
Marcel. Thank you very much for your answer. 2 minutes has passed, and you can go back to this in the next question. Now, I would like to hear the opinion of Umberto. What do you think about the current state of the EU?
May you live in interesting times. This old adage that is quite usually ascribed to an apocryphal Chinese saying, which is actually English indeed, sounds like a curse. And in interesting times do we live indeed. The pandemic has shown that even though we may seem not as much interconnected, we stand much closer than it actually feels like. during these past months and during these years, I think that we must come to the decision that, and to an understanding indeed, that there is a paradigmic shift which we are currently facing. The European Union has been at a crossroads for quite a long time and navigating from crisis to crisis in many scenarios, from the Eurozone crisis to the immigration crisis to Brexit and now to the COVID pandemic. It's clear that now we must act, and now is a good chance to begin doing so. For many years, as had been mentioned previously by Marcello, I think that there has not been much action and much, let's say, changes in how our union is constructed. Now is the chance and the time to actually take on the challenge and take on the responsibility and the ideas that have shaped the European Union since the 20th century, where the founding fathers of the European Union had decided to stand together after the disastrous wars of the 20th century and to finally bridge the divides that have been formed in our continent. I feel like now we must actually think and find a way how we can navigate ourselves through this crisis, which is the COVID pandemic. And I do believe that in the next questions, we'll be able to continue so. But it is clear that there is no path that leads us astray again. We must stand together, unless if we don't, we will fall divided.
Thank you very much, Umberto. It was ahead of time. And now the floor goes to Maria from Poland.
Thank you. First of all, I would like to underline that European Union is very important for us all, and it's a great achievement for all the Europeans. Unfortunately, in my opinion, its judgment about current dynamics, both global and inner, is not proper. European Union seems to focus mostly on inner problems of member states. And to me, I think the biggest advantage of European Union should be its representation of member states outside. Together we have a stronger negotiating position than alone. And we had such an example for European Union recently, which were negotiations about vaccines. And European Union totally failed on that. Great Britain, which recently left European Union, has already vaccinated 57% of adult population, while in European Union it's 12%. So if European Union is actually weakening its member states instead of strengthening them, I think something is wrong, and we should definitely consider a change in European Union. First, about vaccinating in European Union are Hungarians who actually stopped listening to European Union and did their own thing. So I think there is needed a huge change in European Union, even though we have to stand together definitely, and we have to support each other, but it needs a change. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Maria. You are also ahead of time. And now the floor goes to Foivos from the youth of Syriza.
The European Union is currently at the crossroads of crisis, and unfortunately, the young people of Europe are in the epicenter of them all. Neoliberal austerity policies through which the economic crisis of 2009 was addressed have left huge, open wounds in the areas of employment, education, and health, which have yet to be healed. The health crisis of COVID-19 is still challenging the Union. The pandemic has proved how vital it is for the European Union to strengthen public health establishment and how wrong the policies of privatizing health and social security have been. The problematic process of vaccination is once again proof of the lack of solidarity between rich and poor countries. The refugee crisis, which carries on unabated, constitutes a constant defeat of the European Union. The countries of first asylum are turned into living graveyards, as the proportionate relocation of refugees to all countries of the Union is not progressing at the pace it should and it has been agreed on. Meanwhile, important steps are being taken towards promoting the rights of women, towards promoting the rights of the LGBTQ community. It's recent that the European Union has been declared an LGBT freedom zone. Yet, the democratic deficit in the decision-making process wherein citizens of the European Union do not have a direct say persists. So, it is my opinion and our opinion that the European Union is a strong and a stable institution, but it is now finds itself at the crossroads. It has to choose a path forward, and this has to be by protecting labor, by protecting public health and public education, and protecting and promoting freedom of expression.
Thank you very much. And Kuba from Ostra Zieleń expressed his willingness to refer to what Maria has said. Kuba, you have 1 minute.
So Maria, you said that the EU should focus more on the outside relations instead of the inside, but my question is, should the EU disregard Hungary's constant lack of constant embezzlement of the funds given by the EU? Because it seems like Poland has stopped the rule of law bill and has severely weakened it. And that's an internal thing. However, we need to make sure that the EU funds are spent properly, that they aren't misused.
Maria, the floor is yours.
I agree that European funds should be used properly, but I don't think that what the European Union is doing is actually focusing on how their funds are being spent, but what is the vision of European nations and making sure that all the European nations are following one idea. And I think that is not proper, and there are more important things. What I think is that European Union shouldn't get involved in matters that member states can deal with on their own, and that's all.
Thank you very much. And now the floor goes once again. Umberto expressed his willingness to refer to what Maria has said. Umberto, the floor is yours.
I do thank the chair for the recognition. So you have been mentioning many times that the European Union must, let's say, focus on other things, but you're not specifying what exactly the European Union should do. I agree with you that we must stand together and we must speak with one united voice. However, how can this be done when fundamental ideals of the European Union, like the rule of law, the equality, and the ability of people to self-express themselves is undermined by member states? This is not something to be taken lightly, and this cannot be justified by something like, oh, it's our values, we can trample upon the LGBTQI community, for example. There are values that must be respected, and I would like to hear an answer from you. What exactly should we do more when, in fact, some countries like Hungary, like Poland, are actually doing the most to make it less and not more? So could you please address what more should be done? Thank you.
Yes, of course I can address what more could be done. First of all, I think European Union should focus on making Europe stronger. World powers are shifting away from Western civilization, and Europe is actually standing only on soft power, which matters, but only as long as Western civilization is a dominating power in the world. And we don't have hard power, we don't have tech power, we don't have industry. We have actually nothing except those ideas you mentioned, and we do not agree on those ideas. And I don't think there is a problem in some shifts and some differences between us on those ideas. And I think that we can decide in our states how exactly we understand our values, because our values are not interpreted exactly the same in each state, and they won't be, because our cultures are 1,000 years old, and we shape them differently.
Thank you, Maria. The 1 minute has passed, and now the floor goes. Marcello would like to make a point once again to you. Marcello, the floor is yours.
Yeah, sorry. I do believe that the European Union was built upon a shared set of values, and those are the building blocks of an organization which is like no other. We built it after we fought a war that killed millions of people within Europe, and we did it in order to live together peacefully and to thrive with a common market, a common set of rules to act upon the future. And I don't agree with whom tells us now that those ideas, those values were not shared at the beginning. They were shared from the beginning, and that they are what we should build our union on for the future. So let's focus on what brings us together. Those values do bring us together, but we need to look forward with those.
1 minute has passed, and now the floor goes once again to Maria.
I agree with Marcello that there are values we share, and we do share them, but we sometimes interpret them in details a bit differently, and I don't think that's wrong. And this is important, that we have shared culture which our civilization, Western civilization, is built on, and we should strengthen it, because other civilizations are way different than we are among ourselves. And this is why we need European Union. We definitely do. But we have to accept those differences we have among us, because it's not wrong. There's nothing wrong with that. Thank you.
Thank you, Maria. And now we go back to the question that was asked at the beginning of this section. So what do you think about the current state of the EU? And the floor goes to Kuba. You have 2 minutes.
So in general, I think we're in a pretty good place, heading in the right direction, but I don't think the EU is ideal by any means. The European communities from the start were created with the idea to constantly evolve, whether it's by treaties, by the judiciary, or by the Commission. So we just need to make sure that the EU evolves in the right direction and the best for our values. I think a really good point that was made in 2007 was the Treaty of Lisbon, which expanded the capabilities of the European Parliament. It's good that they can decide on bills, but they still need to be able to create legislature. Split responsibilities, like we see right now with the COVID pandemic on healthcare, are a big problem because people keep blaming the EU for things that it can't properly act on. It's also a huge problem that the common foreign and security policy is so weak. We do have important trade agreements, big multilateral trade agreements that are signed. However, it's a constant problem that the vice commissioner for the foreign policy is chosen as being uncharismatic and quite unpopular, so that most of the foreign policy is still discussed with the European countries' leaders instead of the EU. I think it's the biggest problem is that there's too much power within the hands of the European Council, but the problem is that the heads of state don't want to cede that power to the European Parliament. So we need another treaty that will change the balance of power, that will equalize the capabilities of the European Parliament and the European Council. We don't want to take away all of the power of the European Council. However, it should be the one to choose. The European Parliament should be the one to choose the commissioner after the elections, not the European Council. Thank you.
Okay, so that was the last response in the section 1. Nobody expressed willingness to refer to Kuba. So I'm glad that we can move to the second section. So the second question is quite important one, as all of the questions. So should we pursue further cooperation and create the United States of Europe? Or we should rethink the whole idea of the club and go back to what it was in late 1950s, that is the European Economic Community. Or perhaps we shouldn't seek any radical changes and leave the EU in today's shape. The first person to answer this question is Foivos from the youth of Syriza. The floor is yours. You have 2 minutes.
This is an indeed very interesting question. And the answer for us all must be very clear. So let's ask ourselves, could we address the climate crisis in a Greek, Polish, or Italian level, or in a European one? Could we address the economical crisis or the COVID crisis in a state level or a European one? The European Union must return to its founding principles and values in order to be able to draw its path towards a common future. It ought to return to the principles of solidarity and democracy, strengthen the institutions of social control, and support its weakest member states. The current structure of the Union cannot inspire its citizens. Furthermore, it cannot inspire the youth, not to mention to offer us the solutions that we so much require. The return to an economic union with no political grounding and strengthening of the bonds amongst the people of Europe cannot constitute a response to the challenges of our times. How can a merely economic union possibly tackle the climate crisis if it does not establish common agreed policies? What the EU needs in nowadays is more democracy, more civic engagement, deepening of the collaboration among the member states. Europe needs more and more substantial institutions, which shall be elected in a democratic manner and account towards the citizens.
Thank you very much. 20 seconds ahead of time. And the same question goes to Maria. You have 2 minutes.
I think neither. European conservatives and reformists often mention an idea of united Europe of nations. And basically, it is just following the treaties. You see, cooperation brings growth, but also, according to theory of states' power, cooperation reduces the gap between the strongest and weakest. And I think that is good, but I also understand that sometimes for some countries, it might be difficult to waive from the advantages of being a regional power, or to accept that states that have been perceived as weaker or less developed now say no to some ideas, and their voice should be listened to and taken equally. And that is why I'm afraid that United States of Europe wouldn't ensure a real equality or diversity. And still, I believe that we need European Union, as I mentioned before, but maybe not United States of Europe. Especially that I don't believe it would be beneficial if, for example, a French politician would now represent Greek people or Lithuanian people or Italian people. I don't see how such politician would understand better matters of different nations than their own politicians. And once again, we should, I think, follow the treaties and just follow the idea of united Europe of nations and cooperate, actually admitting our differences and working together to build a stronger Europe. Thank you.
Thank you very much. 2 minutes has passed, and now the floor goes to Kuba from Ostra, Zieleń.
So a very simple phrase to start it off is that this world is changing faster than it has ever done, which means that we in the EU have also need to keep changing. And we need to start looking realistically at the world and realize that the European countries are rapidly going to become less influential around the world. And that's okay, but we need to understand how that will affect our reality and how we need to prepare for it. That countries like China, Indonesia, India, Thailand, Brazil, South Africa are going to grow economically at a rate much faster than any of the singular countries within the EU can. And it will be a world of worldwide superpowers that we're going to not be able to manage as a lonely country. We need a strong Europe. We need a united Europe, and a Europe that doesn't have these strong divisions within it. We need to have a single voice, because that's the only way we can manage in the future, which means we need to aim for a United States of Europe, maybe an ideal goal that we may head to. It's years and years ahead, because we need to make sure that we follow what the European people want. However, it needs to be a goal, because that will be the only way we're going to be successful in the future in the world of worldwide superpowers. And we've seen that our project of the European Union, in the way it's been evolving, works. Not only have we seen that through the rights that the people in Europe have gained, through the huge economic growth that it has bestowed upon us, but it also through the fact that this type of cooperation has now been followed by other countries around the world. this model of the European Union, other countries are trying to learn from it and follow through with it. And we can't just stop now. We have been a leader of this multilateral trade for years and years, and we need to continue evolving or we will be left behind. And
thank you, Kuba.
Thank you.
2 minutes has passed, and Umberto has expressed willingness to refer to Maria's point. But before, I need to refer to what Maria said, that she represents European conservatives and reformist group in the European Parliament. So basically, the idea about this debate was to have a representative of each European family from the European Parliament. Unfortunately, we haven't heard back from representatives of Social and Democrats in the European Parliament and the Identity and Democracy. So now, Umberto, you have 1 minute to refer to Maria's point.
I do thank the chair once again. So, a Europe of nations. Well, on paper, this idea does sound great and awesome, correct? But something that we must take notice here is the logical fallacy that is to be pointed out, actually. When we are talking about a Europe of nations, we are talking about a Europe which is only looking for when each and every member state is looking for their own interests. When we advocate for someone to be in charge of their own nation state, as it were in the 19th and 20th century, well, these two times and these particular ideals of the nation state now are quite outdated. So my question to you is, Maria, how can we be strong together if we actually advocate for something that, well, makes us stagnate and does not actually answer in a united way towards the challenges that we face? It's not about a Frenchman representing a Polishman. It's a European representing a European. So this is the goal, I believe.
Okay, now the floor goes to Maria. You have 1 minute.
I will answer to an answer with an answer. Do you really believe that, as you call it, French European will seek for Lithuanian Europeans matters more than French European matters? And that's all.
Okay, that was brief. Umberto, now the floor is yours. The question about whether we should pursue federalization, whether it should be European of nations, or we should leave it as it is today. 2 minutes.
Thank you. So just a quick answer. No, we should not leave it as it is right now. Should we make it a Europe of nations? No, we shouldn't. Why? Well, just to understand, the basic idea and the basic concept of the European Union was to seek an ever closer union. This was written in 1957 in the Treaty of Rome. So what has been happening until now, we have stopped in the middle of the way, in the middle of integrating all of our different spheres of life. So as we began in 1952 with the coal and steel unification between France and Germany, then as we see our economic union of European states came ever closer. But now we do not have something that brings us forward. So the main focus now, as mentioned by the previous speakers, by the representative of the Greens, I actually agree completely and totally. The European Union and Europe in general has states which are only, let me just quote what is actually Europe and what the states in Europe are. According to Paul-Henri Spaak, the former Prime Minister of Belgium, there are two types of states in Europe. Ones which understand that they are small, and the second type, the ones that do not understand yet that they are small. Divided, we cannot do anything. The People's Republic of China, the United States of America, and other emerging powers are forcing and shaping policy which looks at their own interests. When we will manage and we will find a way to find and combine our ideals and understand that what we do should not benefit only the Lithuanian state, the Polish state, the Greek state, or any other country in the European Union, but should serve a common European ideal, then we will be able to answer the challenges ahead. Our GDP is 18 trillion euros, but our budget is minuscule. It's 148 million euros. How can we stand up to powers that have many times more such money? And that is just the beginning.
Thank you, Umberto, very much. And now the last to answer this question, Marcello from Forza Italia, Giovani.
Okay, I do agree with a lot of what I heard. Aggregation works because nowadays it leads to efficiency. So the bigger the better, they say in business, and it's going the same way with social organizations, with states. We will be facing huge powers in the future, and we're too small to work on our own. That's for sure. And I do believe that this project is meant to bring us more together. It's going to be a Europe of nations, a Europe of states. I don't care about the definition. What I'm sure about is that that level, the European level, has a democracy deficit. We need to tackle the fact that we don't really elect the people that will decide what will be done at the European level. That was already mentioned. We need to have a weaker council, even though the only people that can make it weaker are the people belonging to the council itself. So this is a big challenge. But I also do believe that apart from the demography deficit, there's a lot to be done that is good for everyone. And I don't care if a Frenchman or a Finnish decides on it, because we have a banking integration that's going to be fair for everyone. We can shape a military policy that can make us much more efficient as the foreign policy. But the thing I'm thinking about the most is infrastructures across Europe, and the energy grid as an example. I do believe that the principle of subsidiarity will work in Europe. So let's do at the local level what should be done at the local level, but let's look at Europe as the opportunity to do things more efficient at the European level, like energy, like climate change, and so on.
Thank you, Marcello. And with this remark, we ended the second section, and we are going to the third one. The third question is whether we should aim to enlarge the European Union or rather pursue amicable, friendly relations with the neighbors without admitting them to our community. The first person to answer this question is Maria from Youth Forum of Peace.
For Poland, year 2004, when we joined European Union, was a great year, definitely. And we have then, in a way, officially rejoined Western civilization again. And it was very important for my nation. It also definitely boosted our economic growth and strengthened our security. And this is why my country always supports our Western neighbors, Eastern neighbors, I'm sorry, and also sovereign states on their way to union. And I think it is one of the very few issues on which in Poland we have a consensus, political consensus. But I do agree that such decisions cannot be rapid, and those states have to be ready. Otherwise, such decisions could harm both European Union, destabilize it, and harm new member states. Before enlargement, we have to make sure that new states are actually ready and that they respect our values. For example, Ukraine has to stop the problem of corruption. It has to settle the status of Donbas. Belarus needs democratic elections. And for now, I think we definitely should, and we actually are obliged to help those countries on their way to union. And the best way to proceed is, in my opinion, tightening cooperation when and where it is possible. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Foivos from the youth of Syriza expressed his willingness to make a point to Marias.
Thank you, Lucas. I heard the statement of Maria, and I heard with real interest words like values, like democracy, and criticism over countries who do not respect freedom and democracy. And I would like to ask Maria and the party that she represents in our debate here today, does she agree or not with the restrictions on the abortions made by the Polish government? because this is a core value. The respect of the freedom of women to choose what to do with their body is a core value of the European Union. Thank you.
Thank you, Maria. The floor is yours.
You see, this is a very delicate matter, and there's also a freedom and a right to leave, except a right to abortion. And I think it's a discussion for a different matter, and it shouldn't take only 1 minute. So I will just stay with that.
Thank you. And now the floor goes to Umberto, who also expressed his willingness to refer to Maria's point.
I thank the chair. Actually, I will not even go. I really like the question of my colleague from Syriza, by the way. But if we are not going to debate about the right to reproductive rights, it's no issue then. Fair enough. Let's not debate that. What about the rule of law? Is it a core value of the European Union or not? Because actually in Poland, as far as I am aware, the court system has been quite politicized during the years. So my question is, when we are talking about countries that should respect our values, which I agree with, can you tell me then, where do we draw the line? Is politicizing the courts, therefore eroding the rule of law, a good value that we should pursue? Then how can we say that we must get rid countries of corruption first? We must make them more democratic, with which I agree. However, please do address the politicization of the courts. I mean, this must be addressed.
Okay, Maria, you have 1 minute.
Yes, thank you. Actually, thank you for that question, because that is a problem, that a lot of Europeans think that there is a problem with rule of law in Poland. But actually, it's hard to point where exactly. Politicization of courts, what does this mean? In the United States, president actually decides who is the judge, the highest judge. In Poland, no. Actually, rules we have in Poland are the same as in Europe. Every rule we have about the courts exists somewhere else in Europe, in European Union, but we hear only about Poland. That is why I thank you for that question, and I hope that next time you will have a certain point we could discuss, because I don't find anything wrong about Polish judiciary. Maybe except the fact that some judges are not are politicized, but it's not a problem of recent years.
Thank you. And now we are going back to our questions of the third section. So should we pursue the enlargement of the European Union, or we shouldn't enlarge our community and just have friendly relationship with others? Kuba from Ostra, Zieleń, you have 2 minutes.
So first, I'll just quickly answer that USA has a huge problem with the courts not being independent, and that one of the big problems in Poland is our general attorney is also the Minister of Justice, making the politicians of the ruling party basically untouchable. But moving to the question, it really depends on which neighbor we're talking about. I think we should aim to enlarge our community with all of the countries which want to join, but also are able to fulfill the list of requirements for joining the European Union. However, we really need to do this process with caution. We can already see how much damage Poland has been doing to the Union, by Poland and Hungary, by completely disregarding its rules. We need to make sure first that the European Union is able to act on these kind of interactions. We need to make sure that the money from the European Union is not being embezzled. That's one of the first things. The rule of law needs to be kept, because if we keep increasing the EU, but we can't make sure that the funds are being spent correctly, and there is a lot of corruption, then there is no point in expanding the EU. However, we can see that countries like Albania, Montenegro, North Macedonia are really on the road to the European Union. And we need to support them in their journey. We need to help them on their journey, but not admit them until they're ready. And we also need a strong cooperation with Africa. This is one of the neighbors that is going to be the most important in the future, but we need to be wary in our cooperation not to exploit them. So it's probably best to keep a strong relation, strong cooperation, but not try and have them join the EU, to not start exploiting them like we used to. And we really need favorable multilateral trade agreements signed off by the EU which comes back to the point I was making before, that we need stronger foreign relations as a united, strong Europe with one single voice. We need to stop this policy, a foreign policy, which is made by the heads of the European states, because that just makes us look weaker, that just makes us weaker on the stage, and we can't negotiate as strong of deals as we're able to otherwise. And this is also...
2 minutes has passed. Sorry, the rules were set before our discussion. And now the floor goes to Umberto. Enlargement of the EU or no?
I think that it's a great question. However, we must firstly begin by stating that, well, if a country respects the values of the European Union, then of course it should be able to join our union. However, currently, we must understand that also when there are more countries joining the European Union, then the processes of negotiations and other similar, let's say, things that we do together get dragged on even further. So first of all, I think we must address the fact that the processes and the general procedures that are followed now are too long. We cannot react in a quick manner when we have even a larger community that joins us and even more countries. I agree totally with the other speakers that first of all, there must be the criteria for them to join, democracy, rule of law, and other things delineated in the criteria. However, we must firstly understand that, well, amicable relations with other states must be our focus, especially with those who want to seek to join the European Union. We must help them. We must be a cooperative partner in the journey towards joining, if they wish so, if the people of the country wish so. However, if we look to other states, we must also address that not with every single state can we pursue amicable relations. We have states like the Russian Federation, in which, by the way, even though we have sanction regimes, some countries are still following divergent policies, like building pipelines together, like Nord Stream 2. This is not something that helps us look strong, as Kuba said previously. So I think that we must focus on that, find a way to, in general, help those who want to join, but first we must fix the way that we do and operate in our union in general. But everyone must be able to join if they have the core values and they respect our treaties.
Thank you very much. And now, Foivos, the floor is yours.
When any aspect of our lives is globalized, we cannot only think inside the limits of our own nation states. Social change, deep democratic reforms, and progress can only occur in large transnational and international coalitions. Therefore, we are in favor of an enlarged union which will support the founding values of Europe. The prospect of the EU enlargement, especially for the countries in the Western Balkans, should not be viewed as an attempt by the European Union to create an isolation zone for Russia. Instead, it should be viewed as a bridge of friendship, peace, and cooperation between all Europe's neighboring countries. Let's take, for example, the Prespa Agreement of 2018 between Greece and North Macedonia, which gave a solution to a long-running dispute between the two countries. We can now safely say that it was a major positive development in the Balkans, as it contributed to the strengthening of stability and the advancement of the region's integration into the Euro-Atlantic institutions. We should note, though, that the enlargement of the Union will be meaningless if the democratic institutions and the institutions of transparency in the future member states of the Union do not become stronger and deeper. What is a bigger European Union without an upwards equation of labor rights, without guarantees of equality for all citizens despite their religion or their sexual orientation, without solidarity to the refugees and the poor? It is nothing. So we say a big yes to a bigger European Union, which will best protect and promote the respect of democracy, the European solidarity, labor rights, LGBTQ rights, and will address the climate crisis effectively.
Thank you very much. And last but not least, Marcello from Forza Italia, Giovani.
I believe the political environment across Europe has changed a lot since the early 2000s, where welcoming eastern states was an act of redemption for them, the opportunity to join a community that could lead to joining the West. This is no longer the case. That season has ended. And mistakes have been done because Europe was wealthier back there. The big countries were bigger in the world, and they were trying to help their neighbors in a way they cannot afford anymore. And we've seen mistakes with the 2003 integration, but we've seen also mistakes when it comes to the euro. Some countries were not telling the truth about their situation back when they joined. So I do believe that the current situation requires a thorough analysis of why a state wants to join. We have been tricked for 20 years by Turkey because they wanted to play the Europe card as an electoral opportunity for then seeing that there was no interest in joining us. So maybe the focus now should not be too much on broaden the union, but it should be on how a big union already should understand when a new member can come in, but also a big union already should try and establish new relationships across the globe as a union. So foreign policy. I heard that Africa was mentioned. I am much more interested in how a united Europe can help Africa than how a new microstate can join the union.
Thank you, Marcello. Before we move to the fourth section, Kuba expressed his willingness to refer to what you have said. Kuba, you have 1 minute.
So my question is, these two things, both helping and integrating new countries or working on multilateral trade agreements and integrating are not exclusive. And how can we not afford getting and integrating new states into the EU if there is no better long-term investment into a country than integrating a new one into the EU, looking at it purely capitalistically from the market side. And also Greece was not telling the truth, which meant that the euro was a big failure at the beginning. But that's a point to the EU having more oversight. That's a point to the EU having checking the things, not just believing the states. But it's not a point against them joining, integrating further. It's a point against just believing and not checking the facts before making big decisions.
Oh, I totally agree with you, Kuba. What I mean is that when there is a political rush to do something, things are overlooked. That's what happened in the early 2000s. And it was the case. It was a good opportunity anyways. Now it's not the case anymore. Now, if we want to integrate new countries, we should check thoroughly on their credentials, let's say. That wasn't done before. It's needed now. So my point is that if we do so, we can integrate new countries, but in the current political situation, I think the priorities are different at the moment, even though let's keep negotiating with some good-willing countries, not countries like Turkey as an example that has used it politically speaking, and it was foreseen, but we kept allowing that, and look what's happening right now. They even withdrew from the Istanbul Agreement on the other day, so big mistake there.
And with this remark, we ended the third section of our debate. The fourth question, and the last asked by me, is whether there is a common European identity. And the first person to answer this question is Umberto from Lithuanian Liberal Youth. 2 minutes.
Thank you. So, of course, the European Union, and there is a common European identity. I think that, as has been previously mentioned, after World War II, each and every founding state of the European Union and many others had seen that our values of democracy, of human rights, of a place where dignity of the human person is cherished is something that binds us together. In these past few years, we have seen many people saying that, well, indeed, we have different interpretations of rights. In this debate also, there was also an attempt to state that we have differing views, and that's okay. Well, I do not agree in this sense, because things that are set down in the treaties must be respected. And of course, if we talk about the values that are mentioned there, they are the same: the rule of law and the other values, as I have mentioned, the free market, the free movement of goods. These are things that bind us together. While our national identities and our histories really differ, and sometimes we have had clashes between our nations in general during the vast swath of European history, we must come to understand that there is something that unites us, especially our common things that we have felt during these years. We have been a continent ravaged by war. The European Union has put a stop to that. Peace is something that makes us prosper, and every single thing that we are currently doing leads us to a better future. While we have disagreements on how values may be interpreted, of course, people have different values. However, things that are intrinsic to our continent and to the European Union in general should be respected, and this is the way forward.
And thank you for this remark. And now the floor goes to Foivos from the youth of Syriza. 2 minutes.
Thank you, Lucas. All Europeans proudly carry the heritage of the Enlightenment together with humanism and solidarity. We must not forget that Europe is the birthplace of democracy and human rights. Especially among younger generations, among us, this heritage manifests itself in common values: our respect for democracy, our understanding of other cultures, and the sense of belonging in a common society, in a community. The European identity for us is the idea of belonging to and personally identifying with Europe in a cultural and a political way. For the left, identity is not just a status, but a political statement. People are focusing on the things that connect them instead of those drawing them apart. Europe was created after two great wars, after which we won. European democracy won against fascism, against Nazism, against tyranny. This fight for the rule of law in Europe is also a strong part of the European identity. The rule of law is harmed in some member states like Hungary or Poland, as we have already said, and this should set the alarm for our common future. European identity means a common perception on democracy, free elections, secured change of power between political parties, secured rights for the opposition, secured the right to manifest freely against what we perceive as inequality, secured freedom of the press. European identity means a common perception on inclusive societies, respect of religion differences, Christianity, Islam, respect of LGBTQ rights, respect of women's rights to do what they want with their own bodies. The European identity goes even beyond all that. European identity carries the weight of high environmental standards for the protection of the health and well-being of the people and the biodiversity.
Thank
But not least,
Thank you, Foivos. 2 minutes has passed, and you will have opportunity because Maria expressed willingness to refer to your point. Maria, 1 minute.
I can see we can't go on from Polish rule of law in Poland and in Hungary. So I would like to ask Foivos, did you actually hear even about recent matters in Czech Republic, where Prime Minister actually started a special state while the parliament disagreed on it, just using the argument that he can start a new one, not just prolonging the old one. I think that is way more questionable under the rule of law than what actually is happening in Poland or in Hungary, but we don't hear about it because actually Brussels doesn't have a problem with Czech politicians, and Polish politicians or Hungarians just have different interests than many politicians in Germany, France.
Thank you, Maria. Foivos, 1 minute.
I have actually heard about that, Maria, and it's very interesting that you refer to that, because I think that being European means gathering all the good practices of our states, of our democracies, and combining them and trying to make the others make their democracies better and create a common good European democracy. If we compare ourselves to the bad practices, to the wrongs of any other member state, we do not make ourselves better. We must compare ourselves and our democracies to the best practices in the European level. And many European states, unfortunately, fail to reach these standards. So we should not make comparisons, and we should not take for granted the bad things of the Europe rather than the progressive and good ones.
Thank you very much. And now the floor goes to Marcello. So is there a common European identity?
I do believe that there is a common European history, and there's also a common European awareness of what can happen when you don't choose the right models in social organizations. We have experienced firsthand fascism, Nazism, communism as well, and we have figured that the laws that work, the systems that work, should rely on the separation of powers, should rely on democratic elections, should rely on representation at different levels. That's what, as European, we have learned. And that's what the European project is all about. Then we share a common Judeo-Christian heritage. We share a lot of history where we have contaminated each other. But what we share is awareness of what is the right path to be in peace for the future. And I do believe that this path comes with bumps. And I understand that we are facing some countries that have younger democracies where you see that they haven't embedded democracy as much as the Western Europeans has. This is a bump on the road. Let's push them back. Let's see when a new government will take place. Let's see how the citizens react. Let's see how our institutions react to that. I am happy that there's a reaction, and I also believe that those bumps are needed. We were not born with democracy, and those countries weren't born with the democracy. Their democracy is not even 20 years old. So there's an opportunity because we have a right solution.
Thank you very much, Marcello. And now the floor goes to Kuba from Ostra, Zieleń. 2 minutes.
Just a quick point to respond. If we compare ourselves, like Maria said, to the states doing the worst, and we'll say, look, we're not just doing bad. This one state did the bad thing. That's not a good path to look at. We do things constantly badly, and that the Czech Republic does one thing that is not following the rule of law is not an excuse in any way, even if they constantly did things incorrectly. And there is undoubtedly a common European identity. However, we also vary extremely differently. An American could say that the American states are just as varied as European states. They do tend to say that sometimes, but one quick trip around Europe will easily change their mind, because we do have common values. We do have important pillars that we all work from that allows us to really build a European Union together. We have democracy and a capitalist system that allows us to bring ourselves closer and closer together towards European integration. And we have to remember that the EU values the strength of the individual cultures. We're all able to learn from each other, build on each other. The EU puts an emphasis on making sure that each of the countries keeps their individual culture, from grants and funds towards repairing and restoring and cultivating this cultural heritage. to also the protected designation of origin, allowing for certain goods which are produced in a country to be protected, to not be ripped from that area and sold for profit by mass companies. But we have to remember what is really important, that regions within our countries are also extremely varied. It's not like one country is one solid identical block. We're all different, and we have these different varied cultures within. If we didn't go towards further integration despite the differences, then we would have stayed at the settlers era. We would have not moved on towards such further development of the human race. So we need...
Thank you, Kuba. 2 minutes has passed, and now the floor goes to Maria.
I will start just quickly referring to what Kuba said. That wasn't an excuse, what I mentioned, because I don't think that Polish government is doing something wrong or breaking the rule of law. I was just trying to show a pattern that showing actually one certain thing that was wrong in Czech Republic, that we're not treated equally. And again, here, this was supposed to be a discussion about European Union, and we are throwing slogans about Poland and Hungary all the time. Okay, I can understand when maybe Poland and Hungary are so important that we shouldn't talk about anything else. And also, you said about diversity, that we should cooperate despite differences. But here again, Poland has a different opinion on one matter like abortion, and we are not cooperating despite differences, but throwing slogans about fascism. But coming to European identity, nobody has actually asked the question, what are we actually talking about? What is European identity? Is it an identity with a continent, Europe as a continent, or maybe with European Union? Because what I think we must all agree on is that we have a common identity with Western civilization, even though we don't call ourselves Westerners, but we identify ourselves with Western values and culture. But when it comes to identification with Europe as a continent, it would go across civilizations. We have Orthodox civilization also in Europe. So what are we actually talking about? What do we mean by it? When it comes to European identification,
thank you, Maria.
what's the
2 minutes
difference
has
with
passed.
other Western countries?
But you will have opportunity to express, actually 2 times. So Kuba and Umberto expressed their willingness to refer to your point. Kuba, you're first.
So quick responses. First, we talk most about Hungary and Poland because they're the ones who not only are constantly breaking the laws of the EU, they're also stopping things like the huge funds that we're going to help restore the economy from the COVID crisis. And the very important thing about the Polish culture, abortion does not originate in it. The new laws on abortion were made barely any years ago. It's not true that it originates within our culture. It came to us with the new Catholic rule over Poland that was negotiated with the politicians. It is not a vital part of our culture. It didn't come from it. It came from misinformation. It came from the way Poland shifted within the last 30 years, not something that we had for years and years and years in past, like the identity we have.
Thank you very much. Now the floor goes to Maria. 1 minute.
Well, but yet we are again discussing abortion, and I wasn't the one to start it. So that's what I mean, actually. And again, we have our differences, and also about the perception of Polish government. And I hear again that it's just wrong. And this is my problem. Again, we are talking about Poland instead of where the European Union should go.
Thank you very much. Now, Umberto, the floor is yours.
And precisely, we are talking about Poland, we are talking about Hungary, we are talking about many other member states, because, correct me if I'm wrong, you are the one who wants to talk about a Europe of nations. Then we must therefore discuss our nations that constitute the European Union. Now, if you have said that you do not see a problem with how the Polish court system is going currently, fair enough. It's fine because now the ruling party is the one on your side. But the problem is that if someone will come up and will not be of the same orientation, they will draft laws based on the system that is now 22 constitutional court judges have said that the system was politicized. So my question to you is, well, we are not talking about slogans. We're just trying to set down and set the record straight that we must follow the same principles. And we're not even saying that, well, abortion, well, of course, it's up to debate for some. For me, it's not. I think the right to choose is paramount. However, the laws, how they are drafted, they must stay and adhere to the treaties. If this changes, this we cannot go forward. Thank you.
1 minute has passed, and now the floor goes to Maria to respond to you.
And I accept that if a different party will win the elections, things will change. That's democracy, and I accept it. But what I would like is that when the ruling party has won elections, their decisions, as long as they are actually lawful, would be also accepted, not questions just because somebody doesn't accept it. I'm in opposition. And it's normal, and it exists everywhere, that there is some link between judges, judicial power, and executive power and other powers, because actually that's how it works. All powers should influence each other and control each other. And there is a problem if nobody controls judges. It can't be like that, because that's not democracy.
Thank you very much. And that was the end of the fourth section of our today's debate. Now we are going to the last one, when our participants will have 2 minutes to express their own opinions concerning the discussed topic. The first person to take the floor is Kuba from Ostra, Zieleń. The floor is yours.
So I think to sum up everything that we've talked about, we need to remember that working on these certain first, foremost important problems, which is solving the problem with the lack of direct democracy, moving more power from the European Council towards the European Parliament, it should be step one. And after we're able to do that, after we're able to sign another treaty, we need to work on not only amicable cooperation with states nearby, but also on introducing new member states into the EU. And it's important that we talk about Poland and Hungary, that we mention them constantly, because we cannot move forward if we have places that do not follow the same democracy, if we have places that continue to falsely spend the funds given by the EU. Because I would agree that it would be wasteful to integrate a new state if the funds we're giving to them are being misused. So we need to really focus down on working on the internal problems and further integration and being able to be more efficient with all these problems. We can't continue to blame the EU and hope the EU gives us solutions and help during a COVID pandemic, but also not give them the abilities to do so. We're splitting these responsibilities. As someone said before, we're waiting for a really slow process because the Council of Europe, the people who are governing over countries need to decide, we need to meet up and decide on matters that should be acted on quickly. We have a separate parliament, the European Parliament, which needs more power. They are directly elected, and they should be able to create legislation to decide on the most important matters. And that's when we need to push on legislators from each of the separate countries in order to give more power to the parliament and cede it from the European Council, because that is the only way for the European Union to truly gain one single voice and to be stronger in the future.
Thank you very much, Kuba. Now the floor goes to Maria.
Thank you very much. First, I would like to underline once again that European Union is a great achievement, and I stand on the position that it's a great added value. This is why I would like it to be beneficial for all of us and to be the best version of a union it can be. And to achieve that, it must be built on solidarity, but real, honest solidarity, not just pointing out things in two countries and letting everyone else do whatever they want. On equality, because this isn't equality. European institutions cannot aim to collect more power than they were granted by European nations, because that's not a democratic mechanism and not a rule of law, actually. When Tribunal of Justice gives verdicts based on a spirit of European law, that is not democracy. It must be effective, European Union, and to do so, it has to focus on matters that are important, not whether a carrot is a vegetable or a fruit, not on other administrative little details. It shouldn't focus on matters that states can deal with by themselves. And I hope European Union institutions will focus on strengthening EU's position in the world. Because soft power, as I mentioned before, is not enough anymore. We need hard power, we need tech power, we need resources, we need industry. And instead of dealing with inner matters of member states and creating even stronger conflicts, we can focus on this. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Now the floor goes to Foivos from the youth of Syriza.
The challenges that the European Union faces call for clear and concise action. In order to tackle these issues, we have to change our approach. We need to stand together more than ever. The COVID pandemic has questioned everything we knew, but above all, it destroyed the neoliberal narrative. The countries, the peoples across the world are still standing and alive thanks to the public healthcare systems, or whatever was left of them in many cases. What the pandemic showed us is that capitalism failed to save us from it. The European Green Deal, with the goal of climate neutrality by 2050 and the zero pollution ambition, is certainly a very progressive concept brought into life. However, only a system change can truly address the climate crisis. We need to radically transform the economies and the societies of Europe in order to allow for a sustainable model to flourish. We need to connect ecology and social issues and fight for a democratic, ecological, socialist society delivering climate and social justice. We stand together with the climate movement in criticizing the prevailing climate damaging doctrine of the capitalist system and the position that industrial production based on fossil energies has no future. We also fight for the right to decent work for young people and their empowerment in the work environment. The protection of labor rights, including minimum wages, fair pay, working time, is an absolute necessity, especially in times of uncertainty with precarious employment on the rise. To sum up, the young people of Europe need to see some action taken to their benefit. Health, education, work, social security, and the environment are their top concerns. The European Union must make sure that it delivers on those issues.
Thank you very much. And now the floor goes to Marcello.
As every one of us has said, I think we are in a crucial turning point for Europe. And integration is the way forward, even though I strongly believe that what was overseen before was to really exploit the principle of subsidiarity. What Europe is figuring out is where to decide what at what level. And that's a job that doesn't take a decade or two, it takes a long time. And that's what we're working for. Of course, we should not oversee the common values, the vision that we have set. On the other hand, I've seen this conversation focusing a lot on pointing fingers to those countries that are creating problems, that are doing wrong. But on the other hand, I do believe that what is missing now is an easy way to punish who's wrong automatically. It shouldn't be a political issue at one point. because those governments are thriving, because everyone is pointing fingers. Their narrative is working very well because everyone is pointing fingers at them. So let's punish them for their behavior. Let's have an automatic implementation of, let's say, sanctions, but I don't like the name, so that no country can thrive by just saying it's Europe that's taking us down. I want to remember to everyone that even those countries that are taking a lot of grants now, that are the most difficult, like Italy, for instance, we have been giving tens of billions of euros to the EU in order for the Eastern countries
Thank you,
to
Marcello.
grow and thrive. There are rules; those need to be
Thank you,
implemented.
Marcello. That 2 minutes has passed. We agreed that there will be 2 minutes for answer. And the last speaker of today's debate will be Umberto from the Lithuanian Liberal Youth. 2 minutes.
I think that today's debate has been quite a heated one, and I must agree that not only these two states have issues. In Lithuania, we still do not have the LGBTQI possibility to have to marry. We do not have many things that each and every European citizen should have, and that is true. We must not only point fingers to those who are wrong if they are from another state. We must look at a broader picture. And I feel a common narrative here forming, and I'm quite happy about that. Even though we come from very different perspectives, we all agree that, I think that we all agree, that we must seek a more just, a stronger basis on which we can build a more united Europe. And this must come through a bigger democratization of the European process. We are still stuck in the 1966 Luxembourg Compromise, where more power has been given to the member states. There have been initiatives in the 20th century to make a common military force, to integrate budgetary and fiscal policies, but we still do not have that. If we will approach issues that we as member states face individually and try to tackle them at once without having a common answer, a common European answer, then we are in dire trouble. I do believe, however, that even though our values in some senses may differ, I think that we must agree that a way to move forward is to push and to talk in our circles where we have the most influence, in liberal circles, in conservative circles, in green circles, and in other ones where we can push an agenda which fuels a common European answer to these things. And I'm very happy to have been part of this debate, and I wish that together we will forge an even better, stronger, more united Europe together. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And with this remark, we came to the end of the first international debate held by myPolitics. Maria, Kuba, Umberto, Foivos, and Marcello, thank you very much for spending almost an hour and a half with us and discussing the very important issue. Thank you to all those who watched us. I hope that you like our job, and please follow us on social media. And if you would like, support us through the Patreon. Keep safe and have a good night.